February 1st, Jefferson County Industrial Development Agency. With that, I'll open up privilege of the floor. Anybody want to address us, comment?
Dave.
Anything, Dave?
So good morning. Dave Strand, Town Planning Supervisor, for those who don't know me. Received a beautiful letter in the mail about the UTEP draft. I had one question as to Section A, property tax abatements and industrial projects. What determines a qualified renewable energy project? I was looking in Article 18A of General Municipal Law, and it talks generically about industrial projects. Does not make any specific call-outs as to differentiating a good project versus a bad project. What would meet certain criteria? There's no test language in there as to what would be qualified or not. So either.
You want me to take a shot at that, Dave? Dave, first of all, the fundamentals of local laws apply. So the first thing that litmus tested would have to overcome is that it fits within what you guys in local communities want. How does it fit within the zoning and all that kind of stuff? Secondly, it has to fit within state laws, state rules and regulations. As you know, there are a lot of those depending on whether they're going to do a 487 or whatever they may be doing. And then beyond that, if it comes to the IDA for any type of tax incentives or those kinds of things, staff reviews it extensively and then determines if there is real value to you. And we do that in concert with you. We would pick up the phone and call Dave and say, how does this look in terms of your community? And then if we see a mutual advantage to doing so, we would bring that application back to this board and say, it appears to provide benefit to the community, and here's what we think those benefits are. Lyle does an extensive evaluation. It's a rather uniform evaluation that's used across state, and we try to see if it really casts the kind of economic shadow that we would like to see. So there are several plateaus that it has to meet before it gets approved for anything here. If it's a deviation, and it would be under the current proposed uniform tax policy, then we would obviously have to come back to the impacted jurisdictions for approval anyway. So you could say, nah, we don't want it, and that would be the end of it.
Don, one clarification. I think he's citing what's in here, qualified projects less than 25 megawatts, which fit in the UTEP, if I'm not misunderstanding the way we wrote it.
Right.
You just said it'd be a deviation. That's for above 25.
Well, above 20.
Okay.
Above
I just wanted to
20. I'm
correct
sorry.
that so that
I'm
we.
sorry. We don't see many of those projects below 25, not here anyway.
Right.
So,
Well, and the reason I hate to think about a specific project in mind, but we're looking at a couple of 20 megawatt solar fields within Orleans and Clayton, and see if they would fit underneath policy tests for the pilot program as the UTEP defines it, or it could be a deviation, under those same standards. So.
probably the first thing, and maybe I'd be wrong, frankly, but probably the first thing I'd recommend they do is look at the 487 tax plan from the state and see if that provides the advantage that they need. I'm not convinced that we can be of great value to a very small development project of the type that you mentioned, unless there's some unique, characteristics to it. That's a personal thing. I mean, you and I would work together. If you came to me and said, we got this project, what do you think about it? I'd say, Dave, let's talk, and we'll see if we can make it, appealing in some way. If, primarily, it has to meet the but-for test, any of these things that we do. So the question is, if we weren't there to influence it, would it occur anyway? And if the answer is it would probably occur anyway, we'd be probably hard-pressed to consider even at the get-go. And look, and again, I'm speaking for the board. The board may disagree with any of this, but
That's an awful lengthy definition of the word qualified, and I'm comfortable with the language because it's for the 25 megawatts, but I brought this up before and there was no other support, but It's about having definitions on what we call qualified, because the last time I asked the question, you just gave a lot lengthier definition of qualified. I mean, I think so a project's not qualified until we're ready to vote on the final thing? Till all the economic analyses are done, we can't consider it a qualified project?
Well, who consider it a qualified project?
Well, let's say we're looking at a
The
20
taxing-
megawatt facility. When would we consider that it fits in our policy to even consider having the discussion on accepting an application?
It's been the board policy, Paul, that your consideration is done after a complete analysis by staff is done. But it's never complete, it's never qualified until you say, as a board, collectively, it's a qualified project, therefore it deserves your support. I can't say that. I say that Dave looks to me like it's going to qualify.
Bill,
But I
you
can't
don't-
say that.
You don't have the exact language from the county at handy, do you? Because I don't think the word qualified, we tried to match what was the county, and I think qualified got inserted in
So
there.
qualified means we're at the point where we're ready to vote on the
Yes.
application.
That would be my opinion.
And
about
frankly, I
it.
don't think you need a qualifier, excuse the pun, a qualifier in front of that, because we're trying to
Correct.
lockstep with what the county
It's a
said.
tautology, if you do it that
I
way.
mean, everything has to be qualified,
Well,
so
of
you don't
course.
need the word
Yeah, right.
in that particular, and it'd be interesting what, I don't know
Well-
what the county actually.
I go back to, once again, our
So the word
application
qualified is not in there.
process, and we're now doing an escrow agreement for glue, that's fine, but to qualify a project, we're gonna have substantial cost. Let's assume we're looking at a 20 megawatt project. That's probably a $30 million, $40 million project. They may be financial advantages coming here. And
Maybe.
we'll bring it up at the other thing, but once again, if we gotta do all this work before we determine they're qualified, we have a lot of expenses in there, and do we wanna revisit our fee schedule?
Well, but in my eyes, the way where we're standing right now, one of the criteria to become qualified is recognizing the check needs to be written to us to cover, that upfront cost, which is the case with Blue right now. We're hinging on that moving to the next step. So right now, you could almost technically say that project is not hasn't qualified yet because of that factor, right?
There are two, yeah.
I'm okay with the language, but I think we have to have discussions
My-
about moving forward, the cost to get a project being qualified.
A couple
I
things
think
think
we're
we're
extending-
I think we're reading, let's go back to our discussion we had a week or so ago, because we talked about this. I think we're trying to read too much into this. A project is not qualified until it's past the zoning, until it's, past the approval process from your local municipalities. That doesn't mean we don't accept an application. That means until all that gets done, they don't get a final approval.
Okay.
There's no way for a final
My,
approval.
uh,
Basically saying you're
let's-
swapping term qualified for eligible.
Yeah.
Eligible,
My
qualified,
2
yeah.
cents on the word qualified used there relative to its prior uses. In the prior use, we're using qualified because we're referring back to GML, which says these types of industrial manufacturing blah, blah, blah jobs are qualified to receive tax benefits if you read GML 18A Title 1, whatever the hell it is. We inserted qualified here, which is not in the county's language, and I think it may be misused, my opinion, because it's not a qualified tax exemption under GML 18A Title 1. We've allowed it to be a consideration because the county has taken a position. That's just my 2 cents on the matter. I don't think the word qualified belongs there, because it's a qualifier that is, it's being done elsewhere in the document.
Qualifier.
It's a qualifier of a qualifier. I just think that the word does sort of complicate matters, because it does suggest to the public we're talking about all the criteria we use to qualify a project, which we do on every job, whether we like it or not, or whether it fits or not, it doesn't matter. That's just my 2 cents on it.
A couple of other points. One, remember that we get a $2,500 check from folks when they fill out and submit an application. So there is some, and this was a board consideration years ago, there are some monies that flow to the agency to help us do this evaluation that we start with. But then the question becomes, and this is what I think Paul is talking about, is as these projects become more extensive, bigger, more complicated and so on, the question is if we are trying to cover our investment costs, our determination costs, is $2,500 going to be sufficient? It is at that point in time, I think, unless you guys tell me wrong, that I say to you, look, I don't believe we're gonna be able to cover our costs with this $2,500 retainer. We may wanna set up an escrow account, what do you think? And that's what we did with Glue Island, and justly so. I mean, that's gonna be a complicated mess, so. Anyway, that's my take on it for whatever it's worth. And I don't know, Dave, if that gets to the heart of your question, and maybe it doesn't, so.
I see this vigorous dialogue as to what's behind the term.
Sure.
But, well, and it's, I'd say it's a grader, and obviously, you'll have to work that out. But, I only have one other item to put on the list, was on section F under evaluation criteria. Line 5, estimated value of tax exemptions provided. If you could include some documentation about exemptions provided by other sources, and potential exemptions provided by the pilot process, directly to a project. Some projects may get support from
Sure.
either state or federal agencies outside of the actions within this agency. At least provide that documentation trail for an evaluation.
That's a good question. The problem is validating what they are getting from other sources, which, because it's all involved in more confidential information, company information. So what we can do and have done in the past, in a complicated project, is ask for what the other support they're getting. So we have that as information. But I would tell you, Dave, honestly, we're at their mercy to make sure that information is deadly accurate. We certainly, that was intended to provide to you what we were going to provide as incentives, what the amount of that dollar would look like.
Part of our application requires them to put the entire project pro forma to task. I mean, we might not see
Yeah.
it, Lyle may be the only one to see it if we have a
Yes, that's
confidentiality
right.
agreement.
There's a section where they're supposed to provide that. Everyone I've done to date, nothing has been provided. In the Glue Island application, they alluded to it, but to be determined. So that's how they get around it.
And just if I could add, in cases, for example, if we're doing a pilot to say, well, for example, we are going to air brake and Ralph Industries, which have recent expansions. They got some state assistance for them to expand and add those jobs and build those additions. But part of what the state looks at before they provide that kind of assistance from the state level, they want to see the community provide. So sometimes we have to provide our benefit, the pilot, before the state will provide theirs. They want to see the community's got some skin in the game for a project before they'll commit to it.
But in those instances, at least it's known there is some assistance being,
Yeah.
what's the word? Not
Provided.
chased.
Provided.
Look,
But
considered, sorry.
the thing
Couldn't think of
you
the
have
right
to
word.
keep in mind is that some assistance are things like grants and those kinds of things. That differs substantially from tax incentives. Because it's not, if I incentivize a company for Dave's spot up there is going to be an impact on that local community one way or the other. If that company gets a grant from the state, well, I suppose en masse there's an impact. You don't see that readily. So it's a little harder to distinguish between assistance and tax incentives, if you know.
That's right.
Okay?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks.
Dave, just one
Thanks, Dave.
comment I'll
Yes.
pass along, grappling with this UTEP as a board, and I'll share the insight with you. But we tried to keep this to a 3 or 4 page document.
Yeah, this,
Exactly. And I'll just reference a panel box. You know, this is, the UTEP policy is the panel box. And in that panel box, there's 50 circuit breakers. And every one of those circuit breakers you can use to determine, I mean, there's protection there with all the processes. The working arrangement between the town and Don, and there's plenty of protection in there to get that job done without having to include all those things in the UTEP, which people I think we'd confuse everybody then, and there'd be 150 questions. It's a working process, and there's all kinds of opportunity to influence it to the liking of the community and be protected.
That's a great analogy, you know that?
Thank you.
Well done.
It's a farmer in them.
Dave, you know,
Thanks,
the thing is, we hope that you guys will look at us as an arm of your economic development activities, not someone who's in the mix to try to make your life miserable, you know?
It's mostly just trying to be as open as we can with what information we do know about,
Sure.
so that we can accurately assess it, just as you
Absolutely.
are.
And that's a good ask. I mean, it's a reasonable ask.
And at the foundation of this UTEP, I'll throw this out again, as a working board, we all agree, every board member on here, that we will not impose a pilot on any one of the jurisdictions that does not want it. That's our agreement. And-
Been that way
and
for
If I have to take a stand and go outside that box, I guess I'll be resigning my seat on this board if it came to that.
That'd be a junction box, wouldn't it?
That's when the whole house generator comes on.
There's also some concern about that developer splitting that up so that they become less than the 25 megawatts. Because I think the total project originally was 70 or something.
It's a 320 megawatt pads. Most of them are in Orleans, but there's one that's split with Lake. But the question is, do they come as 320s? So in that case, they fall within your UTEP, or is it something larger that's a 60 megawatt project that's considered under 10, not through local action?
I'm gonna answer on my behalf as one person. They can create 3 separate LLCs, but if the parent company is one, I'll be arguing in front of this board that it's a 60-watt facility.
Megawatt.
Because, 60 megawatts.
Not a light bulb.
Because-
That would economically
Circuit breaker.
And I think that's a decision the board could ultimately make, is whether we're gonna consider the application as 1 or 3. My preference is, 3 separate 100-acre fields built by one company is a 60 megawatt facility. But that's gonna be the board's decision.
Depends how contiguous they are.
David, have you heard that they are coming to us for support? Because my conversations with them seem to indicate they would not.
I've not had any direct dialogue with the developer. I do know our town engineer is their local engineer, for the coast, Rob Camp. He's their local New York State licensed engineer for those applications. But we have not heard any more dialogue from them. We've not heard anything from Orleans either as to where they're going. I'm sure that the recent federal shakeup has got everybody figuring out where the taxes
We were just talking about investment. And just to let you know, they had contacted us some time back, and frankly, I recommended that they look at a 487 before, and I didn't have any project details at that point, but that they ought to look at that as a starting point rather than try to go through our operation.
Well,
And I've never heard back from them.
if you check the state, the Clayton doesn't grant the 487, if I'm correct.
They're out.
So they have no option to negotiate a pilot unless the town rescinds their local law, opting out of it. Same with Thousand Islands Central, same with Lafargeville Central, and same with the town of Orleans. So they have no mechanism to receive any tax abatement unless local laws are changed, or if they come through some agency that has the ability to grant it. Because those towns don't grant it. The fact that you don't grant it doesn't give you the right to
Did Orleans
negotiate.
opt out too?
Yeah. They, back in 2008,
You have to be in the exemption to have the ability to negotiate a pilot at the town level. So they don't have that option.
I did mention that some of the impacted jurisdictions may have opted out. However, that's their investigation to determine that, and if they do, and they want to come back to us for something, then of course we have a different set of circumstances. But for your information, I've not heard from them.
So just a question for the town of Clayton, from your perspective, let's take that particular project. Would local taxing jurisdictions be amiable toward considering a pilot for that solar project? Or do you feel there's established conversation and sentiment out there that would be no different than a wind farm? They should have to be fully taxed or pay their full assessed value.
I think there's a measure of equity for the very small projects, someone's rooftop versus a freestanding field. Development is development, and that should be assessed fairly across the board, regardless of whether industrial or personal.
Okay. Any other questions from the floor? Okay. Thank you for coming.
Did you get some coffee, by the way? You know, we are
Okay.
right up there. You help yourself.
I've read all my
We all received the minutes from our last meeting.
Yes, sir.
Is there any additions and/or corrections?
No, I'll make a motion to accept as presented.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. Treasurer's report?
Page 5 in your packet. So again, just to indicate, the unrestricted funds do include that 170K transfer we made a couple months ago. We actually, on the cash side, we're about 584,000 higher than the beginning of the year. Most of it is clearly the pilot monies that were paid in this particular, it looks like this period, this 441. So that's the biggest jump, obviously. Our total assets are up about 575,000 from the year. Our total current liabilities are up 521, again, because of the other side of that pilot payment that is due wherever. Page 7. The packet, the income statement. So we already started out with an aggressive target of about 500,000 higher than we achieved last year. We need about 107,000 on a linear basis to break even for the month. Again, there's a lot of what I'll call one-time charges, the 279 RCI, a couple convergence things, and then the civic fund transfer. So when you look at all of those and kind of take those out of the mixture, yes, they're money that we put into here. We're actually averaging about 14K a month of other funds coming in. Those are money, and they were budgeted, so I'm not discounting them, but there's only, outside of these one time, they're not gonna occur again. But at this point, it'd be a struggle, but we might be able to hit the revenue side. I think we're gonna be about 200K short, but that's hard to predict in month 4.
Predict maybe a little more.
Well, I'm trying to be generous, and as the year goes on, we can tighten up our predictions. Because I'm hoping on the next side, our expenses, there might be some room for some savings there. We started about 480,000 higher than 2017, so we basically had a break-even budget to begin with. Same thing, 107K per month on a linear basis to quote-unquote achieve a break-even budget. We're probably, as I just said, 150, 250,000 loss for the year at this point. It's hard to predict. Balance sheet, page 9, cash is up. Total current assets are up. Our liabilities are up because of the pilot payment we just got done discussing. Page 20, unfortunately, I'm sad to report, we got 3 new delinquent accounts on here that weren't there before. 2 of them are only 1 month delinquent, so it's not as big of a deal. I think it's just the holiday doldrums caught up.
In the micro area, I added one that you haven't seen before.
Correct, second
But
arbitrary.
I think we're approaching settlement on that, and I believe we'll have something for the loan review committee next month.
Okay.
Did we write that off already?
No.
So up on I'd start with the RLF, really not a lot has changed there. The biggest one is Carthage Specialty Paper. We're making arrangements with Wright Brothers. Those are by far the 2 biggest amounts in both principal and past due.
They have caught up on their interest payments.
Which one?
so-
The Wright?
Wright
Okay,
Brothers.
good.
Yeah, they're current on
All
that.
right, so that doesn't say that here, so that's good news. Total sort of good thing, as long as Carthage Specialty Paper is still considered the only one potentially at risk. It's in our budget to write off. We don't want to exercise that option unless we need to, but at least it's budgeted in there. It's always hurtful to write off that anyway. We got a new commitment for the habitat, micro enterprise loan we made, God, it seems like 6 months ago. Probably was.
They're still, I believe, completing their environmental process on the building.
It's either sign up, so that's a good thing. So that's there, that's good news. It's always good to give out the money to put to the use that it was intended. We already talked about the couple new delinquencies, two of which are just 1 month past due. So how severe is this Sackage Harbor trading one? That's pretty much write-off, getting to that point?
No,
No,
we'll
we're-
collect that one.
No,
Okay,
we'll-
so that's a collection, because it says delinquent somewhere, or default.
Yeah, I
They're
sent
in
a-
default.
I sent a
Okay.
default letter.
Okay, that's what it is.
We have a
We
confession
had a
at that
strange
time.
arrangement.
Okay, I know you,
There's
I haven't
protection.
read all the things you sent me, I apologize.
Well, no, but you're.
So I haven't caught up on some of the information.
Yeah.
Strange arrangement?
Yeah, it was.
It was a very,
We had,
there's a whole history with respect to that account, which differs completely from things other loans that we have made, and if somebody wants a full explanation someday of that, because I think we're going to have an agreement come to loan review at
Okay.
some point, and if you
and
want.
I'll provide you detail.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When it
it's,
comes.
And I
There's a
apologize,
company-
I do have background which I've not read, because I didn't think it was appropriate to talk about it here anyway, because it's not in
That's
front of
right.
the loan review committee, but it's on here, so I'll bring it up. We do have 47K allowed for bad debt. Bic Brothers is gonna consume some of that. It is out for collection, but our probability of collecting any of the money is pretty low.
Pretty low.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe a dime on the dollar if we're
We
lucky.
don't have too much.
Okay, so I guess we'll be eating into that a little bit. The other ones, in your opinion, Lyle, we have some sufficient protection that there are actually efforts to made to at least pay something?
I believe that the accounts on here, other than Carthage Specialty, I believe we will be collecting them.
Okay.
And Vic Brothers, I don't know what's going to happen there. We have a judgment against them.
Yeah, well, that one, that's been on there for a while. It's just
Yes.
that the other two just showed up all of a sudden, and they're only 1 month
They're
behind, so
only
that
1
could
month
just be
behind, and
you're on vacation in Florida for all we
actually, I
know.
believe the lyrics payment has come in.
Okay.
And
The board should know, by the way, that we are working almost on a daily basis with Carthage Specialty, so we are not ready to give up on that yet.
Nor is the community nor the board.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my full report. I would make a motion to accept it as presented.
Second.
Questions? Comments? Concerns? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Loan review. You're on a roll, Rob.
All right, if you're not sick of hearing from me, you're gonna hear from me again. We had two applicants, both very good. The first one is basically, as we probably know it colloquially, the Amish Furniture Store. A new set of owners have approached us to receive some funds to do some different things with that and eventually move it to a different and appears to be better location. So at our loan review committee for David and Sherry Cobb, they approached us for $30,000 for 7 years, and I'll point out it's a slight deviation from our normal 5, but we felt there was very sufficient cash flow and equity and guarantee that this was not a risk at all. So our board, our committee, excuse me, unanimously approved to move this forward to the full board for discussion. Do I break here and then you read the resolution, or do I go to the next one?
Oh, we're gonna do this one first.
Okay, so, our board agreed that this was an excellent opportunity and an excellent application, and we agreed unanimously to follow what is on this resolution in front of you.
Resolution number 0201, 2018-01. It's a resolution for authorizing a microenterprise loan to David and Sherry Cobb, DBA Painfield Acres. Whereas David and Sherry Cobb, DBA Painfield Acres, is requested by application to this agency a microenterprise loan in the amount of $30,000 to be used to purchase an existing Amish furniture business. I entertain a motion in a second.
I'll move it.
Second.
Discussion?
This business, it's a buy-sell scenario, right?
Yes.
I mean, they aren't manufacturing anything, it's buy-sell.
It's manufactured in Ohio for, as they told us, they have basically a set group of people that make all their stuff. And they do have a very robust, what I'll say, online, I guess is the best way to, people that don't actually come into the showroom, so they actually have a lot of online type stuff and a lot of, build to your own specifications. I'm really struggling with words today. I can't think of the right words to use.
What's in your coffee?
No, I haven't had enough. Is what it is.
Anything else? On the resolution, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution carries. Thank you.
Our second hearing at our committee was really just to clean up an error in our first previously passed resolution for taste of design. So we had already passed a resolution to do something. Essentially, there was a confusion on what rights we had in one small portion of an existing part of the loans. We will remain in second place on the existing mortgage for Citizens Bank.
Third.
Well, it still says second then, so this is wrong.
Well, once community is paid off, we would move to second, but as a condition to Citizens Bank
Okay.
agreeing to subordinate to the NCA, they require us to remain in third.
For even the existing
Yeah, that-
mortgage?
Right, we're gonna have to subordinate to NCA, which is gonna throw us into third position.
During our committee meeting, I thought it was clear we were gonna be in second place on the existing
No.
mortgage.
No, there's going to be no change in our position.
Because those were all my
As a
notes
result,
indicated that. It's
yeah.
not that big of a deal, but those were all the notes that I took from the committee hearing, so apparently I didn't hear the same thing we discussed, I apologize. So, we still have personal guarantees from both of the applicants.
We don't.
We're
but
getting
we will-
one.
we have it from Mike, but not from Amanda.
Yeah, so what condition is, we're gonna get a guarantee from Amanda, who is the co-applicant, if you will.
They're actually forming a new corporation that's
Okay.
gonna take title to the property and will assume all the debt.
Okay,
And Mike and Amanda are the principals of that corporation. So, and just to clarify one other point, NCA and Citizens Bank are also requiring a guarantee from Mike's parents' corporation, Maker. And you may want to consider the same thing.
Yes, I've spoken with Matt, he told me he wants the same thing.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Do we need to change anything in the resolution then about all this new information? Not regarding
You're being
my
very
confusion.
kind, aren't you?
Not regarding my confusion.
The resolution says we'll stay in third.
No, I meant about the guarantee.
I would add Maker to that, yeah.
Okay,
Jeez, whereas we'll correct that.
okay. So when we get to that point, you can help read in what we need to add, because I've sort of gotten confused from the notes of the hearing we had. I apologize, Dave.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so, again, we had already agreed to do this. This was cleaning up. We kind of were confused about what position we're in with one portion of it. Essentially, everything else is still good. They were borrowing money from NCA to pay off a part of some of their debt, and they're just consolidating a bunch of things, and it appears as though they're forming a new corporation.
Yeah, Community Bank's already started a foreclosure
Okay.
action, so NCA is taking out Community.
So they're getting rid of them, just replacing them.
Uh,
I don't know if I've confused everybody now, because I was confused a little bit starting.
So just for clarification, let me run through a couple things here. This is an existing loan that we have. The original loan was $40,000. We have a loan balance right now of $24,500. So, you know, they have been making their payments. It's just a matter of, with the refinancing, their refinancing, our position moves a little bit accordingly. So, we're still secured. We still have their personal guarantees.
We have second mortgages on the property as well.
Yeah, correct.
That's what I wrote down.
What's the value of the property roughly?
$150,000 was the last appraisal.
Because it's my recollection, we were always gonna stay third.
Always
In the
Yes.
was
line.
there.
Yeah, we're staying third.
Except for what you just said, we have a second. We have,
Second mortgage.
Second
We're
wards
in
on
the
the
third position. on-
Okay.
third position on this loan.
maybe that's what I got confused, I heard
Yeah,
second.
we were talking about that, Rob, back and forth, how that shook out
Yeah,
on the mortgage side of it.
all right, that, I just wrote down second, if I can hear it.
It's,
But, so, I mean,
Second, third, wherefore, here too.
so everybody, in the case of default, for whatever reasons, everybody should come whole. All, NCA,
Based upon the appraisal, you would think so. And I think there's a good possibility, because it's a unique building, they've done a lot of remodeling in there, and it's in a great location. However, Lisa could probably tell us we wouldn't get $150,000 for the building, I don't know.
Not in Cape Vincent,
No.
but it is a nice building. I mean, they have a beautifully redone apartment upstairs. I think it's like a 3-bedroom and, I mean, but you're right.
yeah, but Dollar General's coming, so it should have.
That's right. There you go. Sell your properties now, you'll get more, right? No, it is, it's very tough to sell.
yeah.
So is everybody just added in here, we did have a discussion, it still looked to be a very good application, it was really a correction of a past, we had already approved the $40,000 loan, we're just now correcting what position we're actually in.
Well, we're changing the position.
Apparently I was
We're-
still confused about.
Yeah, well, we're reflecting
We were-
changes that are.
We were behind Community Bank before,
Yes,
so now you have,
somebody else in front of them.
now Community Bank's going away and a new bank coming in, so
Well,
this,
no, community bank was first. Bank of Cape Vincent was second. JCIDA was third.
I'm sorry, Community Bank's going away, North NCA's coming in.
Well, they become first.
We're still behind Community Bank, is your point.
Cape
We're just in
Vincent.
third.
Still in third.
Instead of second.
Our
Instead
loan-
of first.
our loan
Easier way.
position- our loan position isn't gonna change.
We're not changing.
It's just the bank, the two banks are just.
Right. The two lending agencies are changing. Okay, let's go on
So I think
with
there
this.
was one amendment to the resolution, which somebody else can kind of read in when we get to that for you, Dave.
I'll
But
go
there was
through
something
the-
in the personal guarantee part we're gonna add in.
I'll go through the amendment here, or the resolution.
Resolution, sorry.
So we have Resolution 0201, 2018-02. It's a resolution for authorizing a modification to the micro enterprise loan to Taste of Design. Whereas Amanda DeRoshi as 51% owner and Michael Shavasty as 49% owner are borrowing $75,000 from North Country Alliance to pay off Community Bank. And whereas prior to the payoff of Community, the order of lien is Community Bank first, Citizens Bank second, JCIDA third. Whereas with NCAA loan, the order is NCA first, Citizens second, and JCIDA remains in third. Whereas the JCIDA loan had a balloon payment that was due on 4/1/17, however, due to delinquency at the time of collection was not feasible. And in order to approve the loan, NCA has requested the JCIDA subordinate and remain in a third position and extend the balloon payment to be coterminous, yeah, coterminous with NCA loan. Whereas JCIDA still has a personal guarantee of Mike Shavasty. With this change, we'd also require the personal guarantee of Amanda DeRoshi and
And me marker.
Me Maker Inc.
M-E-M-A-K.
M-I-M-A-K-E-R.
And whereas on January 23rd, 2018, the Loan Review Committee of the Jefferson County Industrial Development Agency reviewed the request and recommended approval to the full Board of Directors. Now therefore it be resolved by the Board of Directors, Jefferson County Industrial Development Agency, that it herein approves the request, and that all other terms and conditions of the original loan commitment remain in effect, and be further resolved that the chairman, vice chairman, secretary, or chief executive officer are authorized and directed to execute any and all documents necessary to carry out this resolution.
Phew.
I didn't
Take a motion
catch
in a
all
second.
that.
Would you mind repeating that?
I move the resolution with the addition of the personal guarantee of Me Maker Inc.
Well said.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution carries.
That's how sausage is made.
Thanks, Rob.
You got it. You thought this thing was easy.
Unfinished business. We have consider resolution number 0201, 2018-03 for revised uniform tax exempt policy and guidelines.
You gonna read all this, Dave?
No, I'm not gonna read all this.
Thank you.
I think we've been through it.
I still had a couple, I'll call cleanup type comments. I don't think any of them were substantial on the front end, and I had submitted them. I don't know when I can offer them now.
I think we have to move the resolution, have a second first.
Yeah, can I have a motion and a second on the resolution?
I would move the resolution.
Second.
I'll second it. All right,
And I would refer to our attorney if, did you sent things?
well, I copied our whole board, you know,
Okay.
when Joe's draft came out, I probably quite quickly sent out a bunch of comments, and there was discussion, well, we do this in a public hearing, which is the right way to do it, obviously. I think on the first page, we used the term pilot term as a definition, and I thought it fit better rather than repeating 15 years in one spot and then over the life of the project in another spot. Again, I didn't think that was very substantial, so on page 30 of your packet, the abatement shall be on a graduated schedule, blah, 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 due over the life of the project. I think it should say due over the pilot term, because the term changes based on whatever the project is. The life of the project could be something else, and then below that, abatement over a 15-year period. The pilot could be 3 years, could be 8 years. So I felt that those should both just say pilot term. I don't think you're losing anything by substituting that definition, but that's my opinion. I can break, because I think he referred this to the attorney, or, I mean, I'm really addressing the board and the attorney.
Well, it's really, I mean, it's the board's preference if they want to further amend the proposed bylaw, so.
Do you think it's
Before we talk
necessary?
about amending it, do you have a problem with the change in the language, Joe, and that language, does it have any impact on what the intent is? Let's face it, we aren't required to have a public hearing, so we should be
Right.
able to make any amendments
We
we
can.
want to a document if the majority feels fit.
Well, thanks.
I don't see where that would have a substantive impact on what the intent of the language was.
I don't either, because, I mean, the pilot term is a defined term.
The only other just add is a question, I think the second 15-year term you referred to, Rob, I think the intent there was saying that if we did something other 15 years, it wouldn't exceed that same benefit. That would be the sort of like the standard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that. I
That's a
think-
deviation,
yeah.
so it doesn't matter.
Well, I think that sentence that says any schedule shall be graduated such that the total abatement provided shall not exceed a 50% abatement over a 15-year period, I think that should remain as it's written. because
It's
I
still
think
the
that's
pilot
intent.
term, if the
No,
pilot-
the pilot term is the term of, is the
Okay.
pilot term of the particular pilot you're dealing with. That just says the standard is,
Okay.
we won't, no, I don't disagree with you on the other
So
change.
in other words, if you did a shorter
where it says-
pilot, you
yeah.
still wouldn't exceed that same
Right.
benefit would have been granted
Right.
over.
Yeah, a shorter pilot's gonna have the defined term of a pilot term.
Correct,
so.
okay. I would
But-
concede that
But
point.
the other sentence where over the life of the project,
Yeah.
I think that makes sense to
Just substitute whatever the term is, the term is.
pilot term.
Okay, and if we're gonna do that, I need a motion and a second to amend this paragraph.
Do you have I'm sorry, David, to interrupt.
No, I would entertain a motion and a second to amend this paragraph to include,
I guess I'm making the motion because I'm reading in my comments to substitute the word pilot term in lieu of
Well,
life
yeah,
of the project.
so you're making the motion,
I am.
okay?
Is there other ones? I mean, do
I
you wanna
have
do this?
many of them.
I'd like to do these one at
One
a
at a
time,
time?
whatever,
Okay.
so that we can,
Just a point of information, Mr. Chairman. I need to have you guys please confirm for me, and Joe, please, that what we do in the changes are not substantial enough to trigger the need for another round of notifications for our taxing entities. If that is another, if we trigger that, that changes
Right.
significantly what we're up to, so,
Means you can't act on it today.
that's right.
That was my question, whether or not it's substantive, and we are not required to have a public hearing, but we are required to notify taxing jurisdictions of our,
We're required to get their input.
yeah. We're talking definitions here, we're not talking
That one's
substantive.
not substantive, I agree with you.
Okay, that's good.
So my motion was substitute the life of the project with the pilot term as defined above.
do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Further discussion? On the motion to amend the paragraph, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Next one's a typographical error, hopefully that doesn't require.
That was already recorded.
Oh, it was, okay, well, it wasn't in the draft, sorry. So, thank you.
Page, Rob.
It doesn't matter, it's corrected. It wasn't corrected in the draft we got as a board, but it was corrected with the public one. I actually had the same comment that Mr. Durant made about qualified, but we've already discussed that. If there's not support, I really don't think the word qualified belongs in front of renewable energy projects.
Let's remove it then.
Well, I would make a motion to suggest removing the word.
Yeah.
Let's remove it.
One second.
Discuss, is it gonna change anything we do as a board in reviewing a project?
What was the word you used,
So what-
Dave? What was it?
Eligible.
Eligible. I don't know, that's just a softer version of qualified, isn't it?
I mean, the whole sentence, if you read it in its totality, eligible projects include blah, 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 blah.
I think what Rob's saying is it's repetitive.
I mean, it kind of just, I think it got inserted there when there was other language after it. And it doesn't agree with what the county had written. It seems like a qualifier that's not required to be qualified.
So let's take it out because you've got a point. Dave came in, and that was raised a question with him, so, and keeping in parallel with the county's language.
It's not a substantive change,
Yeah.
so.
You made that a motion, I second it.
Yeah, I did.
Which page and paragraph, please?
Page 31, second line, top of page, after facilities in the bracket, and the word qualified.
Page,
So we are just removing the word qualified.
My motion was just the word qualified in front of renewable energy projects. Excuse me?
oh, it was yours.
It was on page 31 of the packet.
Page 31, not page 2.
Well, page 31 of the
It'd
packet.
be a packet.
Yeah, I'm doing it
Top
based
of the
on what's in
second
the
page
packet.
of
Top of the
Yeah,
second.
top of the
page.
second page of the UTAP, but I'm assuming everybody has their packets in front of them.
Do I have a second on Rob's motion
Yes, I did.
to remove qualified? Further discussion? On the motion to amend, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
You're on a roll.
Yeah, lucky. Some of these I had made these comments before. So I'm gonna kind of just read them and then we can determine if there's even any remote support or whatever. In a couple instances, in evaluation criteria F33, we already have Jefferson County defined as county. I don't think it detracts anything, but if we went through the effort of defining it in the front end, we repeat Jefferson County later on. Just, that was my opinion. just call it the county as it's defined. I don't think it detracts for anything. I mean, this is for this county, so I had suggested for conformity to stick with what's defined, whether that's important or not. In a couple of other areas in the same section, we use the word area and vicinity, and again, I think they're more appropriately need to be defined as the county. And I can read in exactly what
I personally disagree with that, because when you look at vicinity, you might have a project that comes in, we had Hart Hotel that came into Clayton. If we had a Hart Hotel that wanted to come in into Henderson, it's still within the county, it's still gonna compete, but it's in a different vicinity. So I think that vicinity really means,
The local, but it
The local
could pertain
vicinity.
to the local
right.
community.
Okay, I'd concede that. On number 3, for instance, multiplying effect the project will have on the area. I mean, we use area one time, we use, it's sort of what Paul said earlier. We use a whole bunch of different descriptors to mean kind of the same thing, but there's no instructions. I don't have definitions in the beginning of this. And I hate to say that I have to fit everything on a chart and graph, and I realize, as you said, there's a bunch of circuit breakers and it's just not a perfect world, Rob. There's not set of definitions. So what's the difference between area and vicinity? Because we could debate this for 3
I
hours.
think the intent is to be subjective so that you can apply it to a particular project differently. So rather than
Okay.
being so critically defined that you're
Okay.
pigeonholing yourself, you need some subjectivity.
And that's perfectly acceptable, and I'll move on to the next ones, and I'm fine with that. Just wanted to understand what that was. Number 2, on the same thing, the evaluation criteria. We've discussed this a lot. It came up in Don's definition, but we don't really say it in here. And I really do believe this one should be written down. So we say the nature of the property before the project begins. I felt it should say the nature and the use of the property before the project begins, blah, 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 blah. And then further on, talking about, and will the project conform with the zoning laws, planning regulations, and comprehensive land use plans of that property. It's danced around. It's something we're obligated to do by GML. Maybe you're just gonna say, well, it's in GML, so we don't need to write it down. But does everybody on this board understand that all projects have to follow every single law in that local community, and we can't rewrite zoning laws? And we have to actually verify them, and it should be an evaluation criteria. I felt that should be added in there as an improvement, as a checklist for our board to always remember.
earlier, do we move it?
But there's a statement that says that all projects have to comply with all local. Yeah, and it's in the application too.
Yeah, I think it's covered.
Okay. I tend to use this as a checklist to go down, blah, 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 blah.
Well, and as you bump that back to the communities, whether it's the school board, the town board, I mean, that's one of their, gotta get comfortable with, is the change in this property, what was it being used for then? Now it's being developed and it's used for this. I mean, that's one of those givens that will take, the process will all center around that change, will it not?
Well, we're dealing with something and we've never dealt with it before. With Article 10 processes, they have the ability to step past local zoning laws that they feel they're overly restrictive. Now, the decision on Cassadaga Wind reads to me like they aren't just letting the towns look the other way. So now that we have maybe considering projects that don't have to conform with local zoning to get approved for construction and operation, we still have the responsibility to ensure that they meet the town zoning law, which means how do we handle that where they need to comply with local zoning to get our approval, but they may not need to conform with local zoning to get Article 10 approval.
But
It's
if it's an Article 10 project, you're gonna have to go to the communities for approval anyway, because it's gonna be outside the UTEP. So if the communities object to the Article 10 not following their process, they're not gonna consent to the UTEP. or to the pilot.
You've lost me, Joe.
If Article 10.
But the zoning is not done by, the zoning reviews are not done by the individuals that have to approve the UTEP. That's done by the town board, but their local law says that a site plan review is done by a planning board or a zoning board of appeals.
I don't disagree, but if the community is opposing the project, they're gonna oppose it at all those levels. I mean, quite frankly, you know, if it was a project that didn't go through Article 10, it was gonna go through the local planning and zoning, you know, you're gonna know whether there's community opposition or support for the project during that process.
So, in either case, making them go through the local zoning, if they're fully behind a project, which I assume in Hounsfield they give them a permit, why wouldn't we just make them go through the process and have the town grant the permit and remove any questions moving forward?
I mean, you do have a valid point with respect to Article 10 takes the local approval process out of the picture.
But if you follow that through, the last approval that just came out, kind of call it the landmark case from there, Article 10. What's the name of the project they approved 2 weeks ago?
Casadega Wind.
Casadega, all right. The local community supported that. All the jurisdiction supported that.
That's correct.
Yeah, now, so Article 10 didn't go against any of the.
But did
local-
you read the
No.
one statement in there where they said that the town board just couldn't ignore their local zoning law?
I'm not familiar with that, but as I looked at that and talked with some people in the know, they said, well, the water over the dam is the people who disagreed in the towns, taking the position they took, started their cause after the approval process happened, not before. So in other words, the people who didn't agree with the local, they remained silent. They didn't formulate, they didn't get out in front. And therefore, you know, Article 10 didn't have opposition. They were comfortable in granting that.
But it's what I interpreted from their approval resolution, which is like 120 pages if I recall correctly. They have in one state there, they point out that the town didn't have the authority to ignore their zoning law. But whatever, I mean, this is new grounds for all of us,
Right.
okay?
Right.
And I think you got a project where I believe the town would approve it. Why don't we set the standard and make them go through the process? And then if we end up with a 60 megawatt solar array, we can make the towns go through that process if they want our support.
We do.
So section C, number 2, does that say enough to that effect, Joe?
No, Dave,
Section-
there's a difference between having a town agree to a deviation and the town's planning documents being adhered to.
So, I believe section C, number 2,
Closing this stupid thing. That's why I like paper.
where it says the agency's final
No, that's
approval
fine.
for any pilot agreement shall be contingent upon the applicant securing all approvals required for their project from any impacted jurisdiction and providing proof thereof to the agency.
So it's a prescription, not a criteria of evaluation, which is
Well, I
fine.
mean, it's
Yeah, it's required. It's a
absolutely
prescription
required.
that
Because
is
they might
required.
meet all these approvals, but they may not meet our evaluation criteria.
Right.
for
Okay.
providing the
No,
pilot.
Okay.
I'm generally fine, before we even had this discussion, it is a prescription, just as long as
I mean,
it is on the application as well, and I think we said it was.
The applications cover it also, but
Yeah.
I actually had, a similar comment to what Dave Durant brought up on number 5. So right now it says, again, page 33, number 5, the estimated value of tax exemptions to be provided is currently written. I felt there should be, I mean, it's understood, but I wrote it as the estimated value of tax exemptions to be provided by the agency and estimated value of subsidies provided outside the agency, similar to what David indicated, because I do, to Don's point, the but-for, if we give a subsidy for a project of 30, 40, 50% value, and then the other 50% is subsidized somewhere else, I think that needs to be known during our deliberations with regards to what I'll call the project balance sheet. I'm more strong on this particular addition to be discussed and added in some
Doesn't that
form
get
of
called out for
fashion.
application?
Is there a
though,
copy of our application?
Not necessarily the UTEP, but
Online?
it's called out
Did
in
you-
the application.
paper
Oh, yeah, there's a copy on the ground.
When it comes time for this board to review the application, that information, to the extent that we possibly can give it, will be revealed to you. And then you can say, okay, well, that makes sense to me, or wait a minute, you know, they're opposing the taxpayers, or whatever you want to say. But that information would ultimately be revealed to you. We would try to make that determination up front as we evaluate to say, is this of value, and you know, to the extent there is some subjectivity.
My only point, Don, is I've heard that same discussion many times, and I agree with you. So if we're doing it, we're giving up nothing by stating it. That's my whole thing. We always say we're doing this, but we never write it down. I just would rather write it down. It's an evaluation criteria for this board, and it forces us to do it. That's my only somewhat argument to the point. We're giving up nothing by stating what we're doing.
Up to you guys.
That's my motion, some form of language to that, appoint the estimated value of tax exemptions to be provided, add by the agency, and the estimated value of subsidies received outside the agency. Something to that effect, or more eloquent if somebody can construct
That's
it.
requested on the application, rather.
Well, that's
Like I
what-
say, it's seldom provided, and if they don't provide it, you deem the application incomplete
Yeah, that's
and reject
That's
it.
the check and balance.
Circuit breaker number 15 in the box.
Yeah, well,
Well, I guess
I think it
my
needs to be
only
written
comment
down.
on that is I can live with it being in the application. But once again, we're constantly told, oh, people are checking us out on the internet. And I'm sure before we hear from anybody, they've looked at what we offer as forms of incentives. So should we be making it known that if they're receiving these type of incentives from others, in when they look at our uniform tax exempt policy, we're just putting them notice that we want that information. It's
not
just
my-
a thought, you know, you're
it's not
constantly
my
telling us
call,
that
but-
people are visiting us electronically to find out what we can offer and what we require.
We felt that it was important for you as a board and the community to know how much capital, wherever it's coming from, if it's a federal government grant or a state grant, flows to our community because of this project. And so having that information, in my view, for a variety of reasons, is important. And that's why it's on the application to begin with. And we should press them to get that information to complete the application. I don't disagree with that. It makes.
So we
total
also
sense.
have in the application the number of jobs created and the salary ranges, so why do we mention it here? And why are we picking and choosing what we're mentioning in the evaluation criteria? Some of it's in the application, some of it's here. I think we're giving up nothing by stating what we're apparently doing. That's just my firm conviction on this. If we're not doing it, then we're making a substantive change, and you could argue that we can't do that.
Well, if it were included, Rob, we certainly wouldn't change the application. It wouldn't require additional information. It simply confirms that it has to be there. But again,
I guess it goes back to Joe, is this substantial enough change to go back out?
Apparently, we're doing it.
Well, I don't think it's a substantial change. It's a matter of whether you want to include it in the evaluation criteria or not.
Joe, the advice we've had in the past, and you know, see if this makes any sense, is to try in this policy to give us as much flexibility in dealing with
That was my
various-
point earlier. You want some subjectivity in here, so.
And I don't know whether that's, Rob, in your opinion, enables us to be a little more subjective about it. don't know,
I
but-
mean, no, because if we're funding any project, we ask for equity, we ask for job creation, and I don't think it's unfair, back to the butt floor, a balance sheet and other forms of subsidies you're getting, we have to look at any project, I don't care if it's a $20,000, we gotta look at it in totality. Do they really need public support? Because either they have deep
Yeah,
enough
I don't
pockets,
disagree.
or they have stronger equity partners who can put in a little bit more pro rata. I'm very, me personally, I'm firm on something to this effect, and it's just stating what apparently we're already doing, so I don't even know why we're arguing about it, but that's just my opinion, and I'm one man, so.
If it's not gonna change it, let's here's, not to move it along. Why can't we leave number 5 alone, tax exemptions be provided by the agency? That's, to me, that's redundant. That's our job, that's what we do every day. So could we add number 8, to get to your point, add another item that addresses the outside funding source, the outside public monies, state, federal, or whatever, that the project is pulling in? And just include it as number 8, just to.
So it'd be private sector
Well, there is a
investment or.
number 8. in
There's
there.
number
Yeah,
eight.
go to the next page.
Yeah,
whatever.
I actually got 14 of them
Through
in
14.
here.
All right, well,
I was wondering
exactly.
whether number 14 left us.
Well, mine
alone.
actually
I think,
fitting.
I was just gonna
To your
add the
point.
same point, number 14 gives you the flexibility of requiring anything you want to.
All right, so jump, where you insert it, but.
I have to go back to what Dave said, that there's state grants that, before they make an approval, they wanna see what the local community is putting towards the project, you know?
I completely agree. Personally, the application covers it, but going back to the 20,000-foot look from the people outside of this room that are familiar with the process, to give them that assurance or that little bit of get comfortable with the application, or with the document, then let's put it in there and recognize it, that it might clarify some things for us.
Did anyone read the article the other day on when the guy from NYSERDA was up here talking about solar panels and taxation? And what it comes back to me is for a community to make a decision like Dave or Orleans on what they're willing to accept and what that but-for number is, you have to know at the front end what type of incentives the state and the federal government are doing. And honestly, between when Apex may have made their first decision and the new federal regulations that may come out soon, that number could change substantially. So I think it's, while we do require that in the application, putting them on notice that we want that type of information can't be all that bad.
So where we put it, if we can just add a simple, I can vote for it.
It might fit better in 8, amount of private sector investment, and, I guess you have to say non-agency, because agency is defined, and you're not gonna get private
To Ed's
subsidies.
point, I would renumber 14, number 15, and add a 14 if you're gonna include it in there.
Okay.
And you feel certainly it's not gonna change the intent, if anything, it's gonna clarify.
Doesn't change it. It's not substantive, I don't think, because you've already got number 14 covered basically any information you
Thank
want to
you.
require, so.
Where are you proposing to add it, Ed?
If I would put it right, I would renumber everything from 6 on down and make this number 6. So it comes right after the value of tax exemptions, and put in there the value of, that would be my
Well,
suggestion.
Could we just leave it as number 6 and add another sentence to number 6, that would encompass it?
I think they're totally two different subjects, taxation and revenue.
Yeah.
That would be, I will,
Yeah, all right, yeah.
Okay, so we'll add a
does
new
that work
number-
for you, Joe?
Yeah, we'll add a new number 6. How do you want it to read?
Estimated funding from government grants or
Public
something
funding.
Well, I
like.
think you want to
Just
stay away
the
from
value of
grants.
other-
Stay away from-
other
I was
public
trying to stay away from
subsidies
grants and subsidies.
There you go,
Funding and
other
subsidies.
federal and
Estimated
state.
value of other
Other-
government, other governmental subsidies.
Yeah, I'm,
Subsidies or
I agree
funding?
to stay away from grants, I don't think
Subsidies.
that.
Yeah, subsidies fine, because that includes grants or tax credits or anything, so.
You wanna say governmental, or you wanna say public?
What's
Is there a difference?
What's left?
So it's,
Public.
Oh, sure, there's public foundations
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
could.
Could public include individuals? Because that goes back to
No,
Well, that gets back to
private.
private, that gets back to
Private.
private.
Gets back to
Private
private
versus
sector.
public.
Yeah, you wanna
Okay,
say
so-
subsidy, you wanna say
So as long as
assistance.
there's not a confusion that public could not include people in private sector.
The estimated value of other public assistance?
Yeah, because that would include.
I'm happy with that
Public
better worded,
incentives, assistance, yeah.
that better worded insertion.
Okay.
So I guess I still had a motion, but we've refined the language to add a new sentence, which will now be, I guess, after 5.
The new number 6 and everything else will be renumbered.
I'm not gonna read it because I don't know what we agreed upon.
It's the estimated
Joe's got it.
value of other public assistance.
Joe's got it.
I got it.
And estimated value of other public assistance.
Nobody seconded my motion. Well, you might. Somebody seconded it.
It had to be second or we wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a section on page 9
Hang
of
on,
our
hang on.
We didn't vote yet,
They
so.
didn't vote on that one yet.
All right, let's get that one.
On the amendment to add the sentence, the estimated value of other public assistance is number 6. All in favor, aye?
Bye.
Opposed? Carries.
Number 9, which is on the top of page 5 of the UTEP, page 34 of your packet. And you may have the same argument. So I'm suggesting the likelihood of accomplishing the proposed project in a timely fashion to be changed to in the schedule provided in the application. Timely fashion is, yes, it's subjective, but I figure if they're gonna tell us a schedule in their application, that's what they're agreeing to, so that then is the barometer if it's timely or not. It may just say the same thing differently, but instead of being so loosey-goosey, I think there needs to be a barometer.
I think a timely fashion is a better wording for it.
Okay?
Personally, and I'm just throwing mine out, because I think that you can put a schedule down and, you know, if you set a schedule and you miss it by a month, now you've got to come in and redo a schedule, or, you know.
Well, it could say
I think a
provided
timely-
in the application and as amended. Which may just be a timely fashion in more words.
You could get I mean, you, just so you could get delayed, it's not just their schedule, but other things outside their control, if they have to wait for a government permit or approval or some
Okay.
inspection could delay it.
I'm also reading this in, if I were the applicant, we now get to choose what's timely. I'm reading it the other way this particular time, because they're telling us a schedule. They're saying it's a schedule, they can amend it, so I'm kind of reading it from their perspective this particular time.
So I think to roll out the red carpet and give everything its fair day, from a developmental side, the timely fashion would be more, they'd be more comfortable with that
That's fine.
than they would
I'm not so firm on that one.
the proposed schedule. 'Cause
I will.
It moves, you know.
Number 12, it may be obvious, but make a significant capital investment. I would add in the county. I'm sure it's understood, but let's write what we mean. I don't think we want to make a significant capital investment in Bangladesh.
We don't have the authority.
That's right.
So what do you got against Bangladesh?
Well, nothing. I'm doing a job there. I have nothing against Bangladesh.
How dare you?
Absolutely nothing.
Don't use the S word.
There's Marcus's headline.
So
He's writing real fast.
I'm not
care.
licensed there, so
Oh, you're not-
I'm
we
not
can't do
paying
anything
attention to it, so.
I mean, our authority is limited to the county boundaries as it is.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's, I don't think it's needed.
Okay, that's fine. I just threw it out. Again, I tend to read things very literally. I apologize. That was it.
I thought it was linear.
Literally and linear. I just, everything fits in a box for me. It's just the boxes change sizes.
And we may not always agree, but I can see, there are other people out there who come from the same vision as yourself.
You got it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
In a
Let's
meeting
recognize
2
it.
Put an
weeks
artist and
ago
an
and
engineer in the same
today,
room. They don't talk the
got to
same
the point where it's adoptable.
I'm done, Dave.
Okay?
Redo my motion to approve the document as amended, if that's in order, Dave.
Yes, it is. So we have a motion
Second it.
to approve, let me get that to where we are.
We made 3 amendments, I think.
What's the timeline we're supposed to review this, Don? Is it every 5 years or something?
Yes.
We have to start next week.
So we can finish by 2025.
It is not a law, John, but the recommended best practice is 5 years that we review it.
2 Winter
Doesn't
Olympics from now.
necessarily mean we have to change it. In this instance, by the way, this board has been grappling with this UTEP since 2011, the latest iteration, so it's taken a little bit of time to get here.
Well, there was one time, if I recall, that it was looked at and no decisions. It was originally
several-
adopted in '04, then it was
Several
maybe
times.
2007 or something. It was
Yeah.
looked at and no changes were made.
And that's perfectly acceptable, by the way. That it just says that the board has looked at this, because obviously economic conditions, economic sectors, all that change over time. And, you know, what is good today will certainly not necessarily be good tomorrow. So I want to look at it, and see. So, thank you, by the way, for.
So we have a motion and a second
Yeah, we have to do a roll call.
on the resolution to adopt our UTEP.
Dave,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yes.
Yes.
I don't get the vote?
unfortunately not.
We'll make the change.
Is it because of his
Send it
county
back to
status,
you.
or?
Correct.
That's something I said.
He hasn't received his
didn't like
appointment. He's not even supposed to be here, my great.
He's only listening.
Jesus.
I only got one remark.
Thank you for listening to my
I
different.
got one remark.
I didn't make it easy on you though, Dave. I had a,
Amen.
thank you.
But I will say one thing, it's like the Clarkson professor is here. We can all pass the test on what is a UTEP. You know, if there's a test given, and.
I'm not
This
so
board-
certain we are,
This
but
board
there-
this board could debate any other economic development board in New York State and a debate and come out the winner.
Yeah, trust me, the rest don't have this level of review, just not that.
Anything else, Don?
No, I think a lot of it, Dave, will be covered when we
Okay.
get to board retreat.
I have one thing too. I think board retreat is more appropriate under unfinished.
Yeah.
We'll bring it up.
Yeah, so as long as we're gonna be here, so.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.